historische Rede und vor allem das Ende ist etwas, das mir in letzter Zeit, kannst du noch mal ein bisschen lauter reden, sehr viel Hoffnung gegeben hat. Und dieser Satz, Palestine will be free, den wir auch immer bei Demonstrationen sagen, aber man vergisst manchmal die Bedeutung davon. Und zwar, dass wir fest daran glauben und fest daran arbeiten, dass Palästina irgendwann frei sein wird. Als nächstes werden wir ein Interview vorlesen. Die Person, die interviewt wurde, ist leider heute nicht da. Das Interview wurde vor circa 2 Monaten mit einer jungen Frau geführt, die eine besondere Stellung einnimmt. Sie ist nämlich Palästinenserin aus Israel und ihre Identität ist ein sehr sensibles Thema. Es geht um Fragen, wie sie aufgewachsen ist, wie sie sich selbst sieht, wie andere sie sehen, welche Stellung sie in der israelischen Gesellschaft hat, und das wird von Margarita und Rohan vorgelesen.
Rohan ist die Frau.
Ja,
Ja.
genau.
Okay. What's your hometown and what is it like?
Originally, my dad is from a village called Monaten. That's about 40 to 50 minutes from Haifa. But I've always been living in Haifa. Haifa now, it's a mixed city, and it's the 3rd biggest city in Israel with the biggest Arab population. Most Palestinians live in Haifa, Jaffa, and East Jerusalem. Among the big cities, Haifa is kind of attractive for Palestinians. For Jewish Israelis, it's more Tel Aviv. There are a lot of Arab schools and cultural institutions in Haifa.
How would you identify yourself?
As a Palestinian that lives in Israel, when it comes to official documentation, I have to say I am Israeli, not that I am from occupied Palestine. If they ask more specifically, I identify myself personally as a Palestinian. It was not always like that. In my youth, I said that I am an Arab from Israel. We were so isolated from the neighboring countries, so I didn't take into consideration the history of the place I am from. With time, when you start to inform yourself independently and choose which media you consume, when you hear your grandparents' stories, etc., your own understanding of your identity changes. I never say I am Israeli, unless I have to officially. It changes a bit, especially when it's more work-related. Technically, I am from Israel. I am Palestinian by every other aspect in my life. If I am saying I am Palestinian, it wouldn't even be considered correct. Where I say occupied Palestinian.
How do the Israelis in generally identify you? Do you get any special questions or comments?
It depends a bit on the situation. For them, we are called Israeli Arabs, or Arabs who live in Israel. For them, Palestinians are from the West Bank or Gaza. We're Israelis like them, but Arabs. We should be loyal to them when it's convenient for them. If you identify with Palestinians, or if you feel bad for Gaza, they will be offended. They will frown upon you if you say that you are from Palestine. Religion plays a huge role in this tiny country. It's horrible. They ask for my religion sometimes.
How is your relationship with Jewish Israelis?
When I was a kid, people in my close environment were Arabs, and I went to Arab school. The only interaction with Jews was in more public places, supermarkets, parks, malls, and so on. But from the age of 6, I spoke almost fluent Hebrew, which I had learned in school and by watching TV. I had Jewish friends at the age of 14 to 16 for a very short period of time, just for a year or 2. 4 of them were really close friends. We were chatting and talking on the phone. At some point, we parted ways because we were from very different cities. One was from a settlement in the West Bank. One was from Ascalon. We used to meet in Tel Aviv. But there were tensions. Every time there was a war, an attack, for example, a bombing or stabbing in Israel, my Jewish friends were posting anti-Arab or very pro-Israeli posts. So little by little I started unfollowing them and losing contact with them completely. In university, I had a Jewish friend who was half Moroccan. We are not in contact, but I still have her on Instagram. Our friendship didn't continue for the same reason. They claim not to be racist, but you start seeing their posts on social media. Coexistence is possible, but it cancels a lot of your identity as a Palestinian. You're considered family by Jewish Israelis, but only if you are supportive. Supportive meaning you consider yourself Israeli and not Palestinian. You are pro-Israeli. We call it Arabi Mahamad, meaning Arab pet. If you're true to being Palestinian, they will change your mind about you. It's a very conditional friendship, unless you are very leftist and pro-Palestinian.
How do you, as a Christian Palestinian, feel about Zionism and the idea that this land belongs to the Jewish people alone?
Common Israeli Jewish people just believe with all their heart that they are victims, and they only try to exist and defend what's rightfully theirs, but they don't see that they're keeping other people in cages. I think if Palestinians didn't exist, there would be civil war between the Jewish Israelis themselves, because there's so much hatred in this country and so much separation. There are Ashkenazi Jews who came to Israel from Europe or America. There are Mizrahi from Arab countries and Sephardi Jews from North America and Spain. African Jews are mainly from Sudan, Ethiopia, Eritrea. There's a strong hierarchy. Especially 30 to 40 years ago, Ashkenazi European Jews were considered superior, meaning white Jews over Mizrahi Jews. In Israel, whoever is Jewish is more than welcome, but there are also differences. For example, when it comes to African Jews, I wonder whether they are above or below us in social status. Many African Jews are still coming from Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and there are a lot of refugee camps in many cities. They are the latest refugees or immigrants. For me, it's super annoying because many are very new, the first or second generation in this land. I was born there. My parents, grandparents, their grandparents were born here, and you come from wherever just because you are Jewish, and you serve the military, and then you think you are owners of this land. We, Palestinians in Israel, are considered second or third class citizens or lower than that. I was living in Jerusalem, traveling to Haifa. Usually we have security everywhere in Israel in any public building, especially in train stations and bus stations, and they put your bag in an X-ray. There are a lot of border police officers in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was always on the edge for its division in east and west. Palestinians can access from the east to the west, but there are security checks in Jerusalem. They sometimes check my ID and see that I'm Israeli. Once I was there, and in front of me, there was an old lady with a hijab. The police officer, an African Israeli, stopped her and asked her for her ID. He came in the 90s to Israel, meaning most probably the security guy was not born in Israel and has no origins or connections to the land like the Palestinian woman he stopped to check. But he stopped this lady, who's from here, just because she's wearing hijab. You came here by choice, and we've been on this land forever.
How are your rights? Is your situation different from a Palestinian in the West Bank and in Gaza?
It's incomparable. Besides, the whole thing we talked about, like being influenced and brainwashed, we also have Israeli passports, ID, and citizenship. We're considered Israeli for the rest of the world. I can enter most countries of the world easily. I can get a visa. I am very much welcome at the airport in Tel Aviv. I can enter and exit the West Bank easily. Israelis also go to the West Bank often, because prices are much cheaper there. Therefore, a lot of people go there for shopping, dental care, and fixing their car. But for Palestinians in the West Bank, there's shit tons of checkpoints. You can't move between them. If they want to enter the occupied land like Haifa or Jaffa, they need a special permit, usually a work permit. Most Palestinians in the West Bank have never seen the sea, even though it's so close. That's the main difference. I consider myself very privileged. Palestinians in the West Bank have to fly to Amman, then pass through, because they can't enter Tel Aviv. They don't have an Israeli passport. Talking about checkpoints, human rights activists from the Netherlands wanted to do a marathon in the West Bank. The standard for a marathon is 42.2 kilometers. He discovered that in the whole West Bank, you cannot pass more than 18 kilometers straight without a checkpoint. That means he could not organize a marathon. Imagine the lack of freedom of movement. On Jewish holidays, it's even worse. The Israelis come in bulk. They close all the checkpoints in neighborhoods, and they put pop-up checkpoints to restrict movement even more so that Palestinians can't enter Israel. They do that out of fear that there might be an attack in crowded places. Just because someone is having fun in Tel Aviv, you can't leave your house anymore. For me, that's the main thing that's different. But there are a million things other than that. That's the reality. Israelis say that it's okay to kill kids because they'll grow up to be terrorists. They forget the tiny details of why they hate them. It's because the Israelis killed their parents. We don't have this hatred because we live side by side. We know their faces, so we have more sympathy. So when October 7th happened, we all knew someone who was affected. For us, as Palestinians in Israel, we have a bit more sympathy. Someone in the Supernova Festival, for example, could have been someone I studied with. Since we have this freedom and equality, it's easier for us to see both sides. We don't live under military occupation like West Bank or Gaza. At the same time, this freedom is very conditional. We don't feel equal, and we are not equal, but we have access to everything. I don't have my flag or national anthem. I don't feel that I belong, but I feel safe in my daily life. So it's hard to have this rage and anger. Palestine was divided and occupied. So Arabs living in Israel today are considered living under direct Israeli occupation. Therefore, we should be having the hardest time. But in reality, it's not like that. We have a fake freedom and democracy. So in comparison to the West Bank, that actually has a military presence and checkpoints, we can move freely.
How is your perspective different from that of your parents' generation?
For the first generation, it was the hardest. But we were already born like this. We shouldn't be happy. We are guests in our own country. Now, if you do care about the Palestinian people, it's very hard because of the censorship. You can't walk freely with a Palestinian flag or go to a demonstration. But if you don't care, you'll live fine. But I think what's hardest for me, putting aside the censorship, is that I can't express solidarity with the people in Gaza. Imagine it's actually your home. Your father was born in Haifa, but you don't feel home. I can't even explain how I feel. The Israeli flag and the anthem are everywhere, and it's so much against your nature. It's everywhere. On your passport, ID, you don't feel that you belong. Also, my Palestinian identity is questioned from both sides. Every other Palestinians say that we are not entitled to call ourselves Palestinians. I heard many people saying, you are not Palestinian. And from the Israeli side, you can't even think about not considering yourself Israeli. They would consider you a traitor as well, and could take away your citizenship.